Seems like some Gen Xers need a tutorial on the latest technology. That includes the National Security Advisor.
Mike Waltz came out yesterday and said that he had no idea how Atlantic editor-in-chief Jeff Goldberg was included in the now notorious Signal text change.
You know, Laura, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but of all the people out there, somehow this guy who has lied about the president, who has lied to Gold Star families, lied to their attorneys, and gone to Russia hoax, gone to just all kinds of links to lie and smear the president of the United States, and he's the one that somehow gets on somebody's contact and then gets sucked into this group.
We've got the best technical minds looking at how this happened, but I can tell you for 100%, I don't know this guy. I know him by his horrible reputation, and he really is the bottom scum of journalists. And I know him in the sense that he hates the president, but I don't text him. He wasn't on my phone.
Now, many are incredulous about Waltz's theory that Goldberg somehow placed himself into the Signal group chat. Breaking Point's co-host and former host of Rising, Sagar Enjeti, wrote on X, "At this point, Waltz thinks MAGA and Trump are so stupid they will believe his implication that Jeffrey Goldberg deliberately went into his phone to put his own phone number in it under a different contact."
Independent journalist Aaron Rupar wrote on Blue Sky, "Absolute insanity, as Mike Waltz suggests Jeffrey Goldberg somehow deliberately hacked his way into the Signal group." Editor-in-chief of Midas News, Ron Filipkowski, wrote on Blue Sky, "Mike Waltz has now decided to roll out the story that Jeffrey Goldberg somehow hacked his way into their Signal chat. Just admitting a mistake and apologizing seems like a lot less work than lying and peddling a half-dozen different conspiracies."
Trump has so far stood by Waltz publicly. Let's watch.
They've made up more stories, and they're just a failing magazine. The public understands that. He's a very good man. That man is a very good man right there that you criticize so strongly. He's a very good man, and he will continue to do a good job.
But behind the scenes, Trump world is not entirely satisfied with Waltz's explanations. According to Politico, some in Trump's orbit are very curious about how exactly Goldberg got added to the chat. Then they wonder if Waltz was previously leaking to The Atlantic. That's why his contact info was so close at hand. One insider described Waltz's relationship currently with Trump as strained. And that is what I believe the situation is, Marianne. You know, publicly, the administration is being very defensive of Waltz, trying to turn this against The Atlantic. For my money, I think he was leaking to The Atlantic, and that is why why he accidentally had Goldberg's contact info at hand. I don't believe what he told Laura Ingraham last night. I was glad to see her press him, including it went on in that clip. She said, "I don't mean to be pedantic here, but how does this happen?"
I saw that.
It happens because he had his contact information, and that suggests to me, and we have to remember who Mike Waltz is. Mike Waltz is a figure who served in the Bush administration. He advised Dick Cheney on counterterrorism, and then he ran for House in Florida for Ron DeSantis' seat when DeSantis became governor. I'm sure he's all down with Trumpism now, but even people like Marco Rubio, as recently as 2 years ago, held foreign policy views that were totally anathema to where Trump is. So this is someone who was previously in the neoconservative Bush-Cheney mold. So if he doesn't like what Vance is doing with respect to America First, or trying to have a different foreign policy that you and I are probably agree with more that aspect of Vance in this way, and he's trying to direct it more toward a Bush-Cheney model, he's going to be leaking stuff to The Atlantic, who has an anti-Trump kind of liberal progressive mindset, but a very neoconservative foreign policy. That's Jeffrey Goldberg. So it all makes sense. It doesn't take a lot of conspiratorial or out there thing to connect the dots. No, Jeffrey Goldberg is someone who wants to do anti-Trump stuff and move the Republican Party in a direction that is more hawkish and more Cheney-ish and more Bushist. And Mike Waltz probably wants to do that too, and so you would see them working together. So that is something Trump should be cognizant of, and I don't think they should be satisfied to just say, oopsies.
Well, first of all, the very fact that Mike Waltz is the one who's supposedly leading the investigation is completely absurd, since he would clearly be
It's
considered
like that meme of the guy in the
a
hot
person
dog.
of interest. Right.
Have you
That's
seen the
number
meme
one.
of the guy in the hot dog costume being like,
Right.
we got to figure out who
Right,
did this?
who probably did this. Second of all, his explanations are absurd, and the way the administration is talking about it, let's just put down Jeffrey Goldberg, shoot the messenger, distraction, all of that is childish. But there's another element which I find interesting here, and that is the president. Normally, this would be something in any administration where the president would be the obvious person in charge, laying it down what's true here in the position that we're taking. I find this a fascinating shift between Trump 45 and Trump 47. Is that what it is?
Yeah, I think that's
right. His first term and his second. He, in this situation, is looking like almost like a deer in the headlights, pointing to them. Mike Waltz is a good guy. And I think this started with his whole relationship with Musk. I find it fascinating the way Trump is more than willing, apparently, to allow himself to be outshone by people. Even in a situation like this, Trump is the one that MAGA loves. Trump is the one who could just put this thing to bed with one serious statement, and instead he's taking an attitude that I find fascinating, that he's letting other people take this on the way he is.
Well, isn't it? I think it can be healthy or indicative of a healthy tendency to do some level of delegation without
Obviously,
micromanaging.
but
You know, he
something bigger
picks
is going
people
on here.
who he thinks share his views to run his Defense Department, to run his Secretary of State. Vance is a surrogate of Trump who was being involved here. It's nice to actually have the vice president have something to do. I don't know what Kamala Harris did for 4 years with Joe Biden.
She was in those conversations, but they were not public.
Yeah.
How about that, Robby?
All right, maybe
Yeah.
that's the case. I wish they were public. I would love to know.
Well, they're not supposed to be because they are war plans.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. But more
This is a clown show. This is a clown show, and they can talk around it and they can walk around it, but everybody can see this is a clown show, and you know.
I don't know if it's a clown show. The clown is Mike Waltz. He's the one who screwed up. He is the one who's being shielded from from scrutiny, who's being defended by the administration and by conservatives, despite him being, I suspect, this is solid evidence of that he is an antagonist to the America First project.
Right.
So I would suggest that they should not necessarily close ranks around him so swiftly. Maybe behind the scenes that's not exactly what's going on, because I think behind the scenes there actually is a little bit more of a, wait, why did you do that?
Bombing the Houthis is not a clown show. Please don't get me wrong. 53 people died, and as you and I have agreed, it's a legitimate conversation, and the president had said something.
Now, one that should involve Congress, in my view.
The clown show is that this should never have been done on signal, and I think we need to get to the bottom of that as well. There were too many rumors, as I said before, that were going around social media yesterday, that there had been something that came out of Project 2025, where it was suggested that they would prefer using Signal because those communications would not be kept. So we'll see what happens, whether or not this has legs. I think probably the fact that the president is holding back a little bit is because they're hoping it will sort of go away.
Well, they're also
we'll see
looking
what
at
happens. I
whether
don't think it
Signal
will.
is an appropriate platform to have
What did
these
you
kinds
say?
of discussion. They're looking into whether Signal is an appropriate platform to have these kinds of discussions.
Signal
I don't have an
messages go
opinion
away.
on this yet.
No, signal messages go away. Signal messages go away. And so it is never appropriate for a governmental conversation such as that to be put on Signal. The very fact that somebody in the chat,
I don't know,
anybody in the chat could just include somebody else, by definition means that such conversations as this should not.
I don't know the answer to this question. Is it the case that literally every time one government official speaks to another, it needs to be transcribed
I'll meet
and
you at the
reported?
meeting at 3. It can be on Signal.
That can be on Signal.
Yeah, like hello. These were war plans.
Well, and
This was
obviously,
the
if they're
highest
sitting,
level
let's say they're in
attack
the secret room, the SCIF,
Yeah.
and they're discussing this,
Yeah.
does that get recorded? That doesn't get recorded.
In a secret room, it would be
Would it be
recorded
recorded?
for governmental purposes. I mean, that's the whole thing. You wouldn't remember. I don't know if you were born, but when the tape recording of the Nixon conversations in the 18 minutes.
No, right. I know about that.
They keep these things. They keep these things. They have to.
That's
keep
what I'm asking.
these
They
things.
literally record every time two government officials are talking to each other. I don't
No,
think that's
those
the
which are the
case.
high-level security conversations,
Those get
such
recorded.
as that one should have been.
Those get recorded.
Absolutely, and then that Freedom of Information Act and all kinds of things. That's how governments behave.
Okay. I mean, if
That's
they're
given short shrift in this administration in many ways.
My point.
Governments are supposed to behave.
Sure. My point is this, that like this is something I've noted, right? The nature of written communications or phone calls or all those things is easier to have a record of than in-person communications, right?
Well, that's become, that
So
that
people
once
are,
again, going back.
the point is that people, I know this is the case, government officials, political officials are reserving more of their, for face-to-face meetings or meetings outside or meetings in places where it's a format that you can't, you can't FOIA the words people say if there's nothing recording it, and you also can't say, you won't know what's not recorded, what the content of it was. So I think more government officials are having conversations that way. Something I understand. All right, we've got more to get to today. I have my radar coming up next. Stay with us.